Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Human in the Hard Drive. Today, we will be discussing work life balance and what that looks like for us. I know, at least for me, work life balance can be super challenging when you're in the tech industry. There are always deadlines to meet, new technologies to learn, and there always seems to be higher and higher expectations that are set. To start, I think it's important to actually define what work life balance means. So I'm going to throw this over to Jim and Brian. What does work life balance mean to you guys?
Right. Why don't you start so you can give like a healthy answer and then I'll give like the really toxic version that I have in my head.
I'm very interested in Jim's work-life balance because it doesn't sound like there is like much one, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say. Yeah.
Yeah, so work-life balance is to me it's hard whenever you have kids for one, because whenever you work from home and during the summertime, for example, you have kids running around the house and all those things, which can be hard. And it's hard to make sure that you're working on what you need, but also uh, being healthy in your regular life is hard to define sometimes. And I think a lot of people's lives, I know mine is. But in order for me to have a healthy mindset, I always need to be able to turn off my computer and not focus on work and focus on my kids or my health or my wife or any of those things. So I don't know if I'm necessarily defining it, but to me, the most important part is being able to walk away and not focus on work. I will go do late night things after to go back into work, but having a separation between the two is important for me. What about you, Jim?
So this is an interesting topic for me because I feel like, first of all, it's something that I don't think I fully have a great grip on. And I feel like I might be a little bit out of balance in certain ways. So I don't know. I was thinking about it like when Jay was proposing this topic and putting this stuff together. I had actually remembered a couple of like different opinions I had heard from other people. So I went and tried to find those interviews. I put them in the show notes too. There's one from Jeff Bezos where he talks about work life balance. And he basically, like, his whole take is that work life balance is the wrong way to look at it. What you should be looking at is work life harmony, as he puts it. And essentially, what he means by that is you're you should be doing work that energizes you and makes you a better person at home, and you should be living your life at home in a way that energizes you and makes you better at work, and those things should work in tandem together to actually like make you more energized, right? So it's about energy, not time necessarily. That counting hours isn't what really matters. It's just like how are you actually feeding yourself. And if you are feeling drained, either like at work, at home, then like you have to change something there to actually reinforce that. Which to some extent I do agree, because I've definitely worked places where I've felt like I was drained and it was like counting hours and just getting through it. And there's other places that I've really enjoyed it and I've felt like I've been focused on the output more as a sense of like pride for doing it than just like getting through the hours. So I somewhat agree with that. I put the other one in there with Jonathan Blow, and he was saying basically he's like work life balance is stupid because to be great at anything you have to put the time in, right? And he makes an analogy of a professional athlete, right? Like nobody looks at an Olympic athlete and says, "Oh, what's their like sports life balance?" Right? It's like they put the time in to become great at what they're doing. And then if you don't want to do that, which is totally fine, but there's trade-offs to doing that. So like the best programmer, he says, on your team is going to be someone who programs all the time. And like I do agree with that to some extent. So I think it like comes down to your goals that you have in your life, and it really depends on where you are in your life. So if you're early career and you're in your 20s and you're trying to learn something and you don't have a family or like a really serious relationship, then like you probably can put in some more hours and really like build your skill set up, and it might be worth it to you at that point. On the flip side, if you're like Brian, like you have kids and you have a wife and you have all these responsibilities, like probably putting in crazy hours at your job is not what you want to be doing in your life. At least, I don't know. I've always come, especially as I get older, I've come to realize that like at the end of the day, and this is coming from someone who owns a company that like I'm really passionate about, but like work, it like all you need is something to happen in your life to make work seem stupid, right? Like eventually, like someone in your family's sick, or like there's just something happens or whatever, and you realize that like, okay, my relationships are far more important than whatever I'm doing at my work. At least for me, that's how it is. And just like work is silly. So you have to put that in perspective and realize, I don't know, maybe like dedicating every waking hour to your work is not like the best thing to do with your life. So I don't know. It really depends on where you are in your life and in your career. But those are my thoughts. I have a bunch of thoughts on this, but I don't want to eat up all the time. So
Sure.
Jay, I'll kick it to you to give some thoughts before I go.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic for sure. The way I like to think about it, I can answer the question, what is work-life balance, with two words. And simply, in my opinion, that's avoid burnout. So in my personal experience, right? So I've worked at jobs that are super high paced, and I got super burned out because not only did I not find the work interesting, but like you have to realize this is like a help desk role. And when COVID kicked off, like I was literally on the phone talking to users who needed support 7.5 hours a day. Like I was literally on the phone for 7.5 hours for the day. And you do that every day, coupled with the fact that you don't find the work that you're doing really interesting, you burn out super quick. But I've also burned out at jobs that there's not anything going on. So like I worked for a big four company, and basically out of the year and a half basically that there were probably 5 months where I was sitting there doing nothing with nothing assigned to me. I'd reach out to leadership asking what I should be doing. And they're like, oh, we're looking for projects to put you on. And the stress of sitting there, not having anything to do and not knowing what I'm really supposed to be doing, that burned me out quicker than working in a lot of high or fast paced environments that I've worked in before. So yeah, like I said, really what it comes down to is avoiding burnout. And for me, if I'm super interested in the work that I'm doing, I don't really find it all that much of an issue, even if I am working a lot of hours. But if it's anything that I don't like doing, well, then the work just seems pointless. And then I need a reason to justify why I'm even there getting a paycheck. And the only reason to justify it is to enjoy your life outside of that job. So if you're unsatisfied with the job, I think you need a lot more time outside of work. But if you like what you're doing, I don't think it's necessarily as important. Because like I said, I've worked on projects, like my last role was contracting, right? And there was a project that had to be done. It was 4 hours over the weekend, and it was really cool stuff that I really wanted to be a part of. And because I was working in a contract role, my hours were clearly defined 9 to 5, but I still volunteered to come in and do the weekend work because it was something I wanted to do. And it didn't feel like I was wasting my weekend. Similarly, anything that happens outside of hours during the normal week, like if it's something cool and fun, I don't see it as a waste of my time. Whereas if it's something boring, I'm like, oh, I could be doing any of the other things that I'm interested in.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So
It's funny, Jay, sorry, can I interrupt?
Go ahead.
So when I was looking at kind of the notes, I put on that last point there about burnout because like this like naturally went to that conclusion for me too. And I have the same take that you have. So I think burnout is definitely a vector of a few things, right? I don't think it's the hours. Like I think you can work crazy hours on certain projects and be fine. It's mostly like, so you said in one case you didn't find the work interesting, and the other one there's just like wasn't a lot to do. And I think it's feeling like you're making a meaningful impact, and then also feeling like you're making progress on the road to make that impact. So in my mind, burnout is depression and burnout are the same thing, right? So like, I don't know, when I felt very burnt out in my work for a very long period of time, maybe it's just because I let the burnout go for too long and I felt like I was obligated to do certain things that I didn't want to do. Yeah, it like puts me in a depressive state eventually. And I heard like some psychologists that my wife listened to, like she like explained depression one time that made a lot of sense to me. It's like, okay, if you were trying to build a bridge across a canyon and like you were like using some material and you're at this certain place in the canyon, you're doing it and it kept failing. Eventually you're going to feel shitty about that, right? Like you're going to feel down about it. That's what depression is. Like you're trying to build a bridge, but you're not making any progress. But eventually like you can, by potentially changing the area of the canyon where you're trying to cross and changing your materials, like you might be able to get across. But like burnout or depression is like a signal to you that what you're doing is not working for you. It's like a very real, like, and helpful signal to you that you might want to change your life, which is hard to do, or your approach at least. But yeah, I don't know. I resonate with what you're saying about burnout, Jay, because I feel the same way. I don't think it's the hours for me.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because like one of the other things that we can mention about this is like, and I'm going to try to relate this to the building a bridge across the canyon analogy that you were just talking about, right? So the least satisfied I was in my career was when I was working at that job when COVID hit. And just because, like, again, wasn't really interested in the work that I was doing. I wanted to look elsewhere, right? So I got really depressed with my whole work situation, right? Well, how do you fix that? So the way I fixed it was I decided to completely shift my focus from user and server management to cloud. But to do that, you need the tools to be able to build the bridge to help you move across the canyon. So if you don't have the right tools, then there's no way that bridge is going to get built, right? So if you're spending 8 hours a day doing something that you don't like, you could say you're working on that bridge for 8 hours and nothing gets done. And then outside of work, you have to learn all of these other skills. And so say you're doing your studying, 1 to 2 hours a night after work. You just work 8 hours and accomplish nothing on building that bridge. How motivated are you going to actually be after work to learn the tools that you need to actually finish the bridge? Because like 80% of the work that you're doing is getting work. And I know a lot of burnout comes from that, especially in tech, because like there's so much new technology that gets released every year that people expect you to keep up with and stuff like that. And no one really wants you to learn those skills on the job anymore, right? They want you to come in with that knowledge. So I think the biggest part, as I said before, is definitely it's easier to avoid if you're actually happy with the work that you're doing, and it matters much less if you're satisfied.
Yeah, there's been several. Interject.
Okay.
There's definitely times in my career that obviously burnout doesn't mean you have to completely change and shift what you're doing completely. It can be for sure. But there's been times in my career where I've just like pretty not interested in what I'm doing, but getting a new project or asking your management for something different, which is a tool to change your mindset, has helped me get through some of those times where I'm just like not interested in what I'm working at all and not enjoying my job. And then if you are able to ask your management, or I'm sure there's other ways as well, but for a certain project or to get on a certain team that you find interesting, or that might be something completely different that you are doing, can get you out of that funk. And it's worked for me several times because I've definitely been there. But
oh yeah. I definitely I'm not advocating that anyone who feels a little burnt out completely like restructure their life and like change industries and whatever. I totally agree, Brian. Like sometimes even as simple as like a perspective shift can help you break out of whatever funk you're in, right? To like understand why you're doing things. And as long as you really believe in the goals that you've set and you're making progress towards them, I think you won't feel burnt out too bad. But it's hard to do that. It's hard to frame things that way.
Yeah, for sure. To be especially hard too. Like I know for me, making progress towards something, again, building the bridge alleviates at least a part of the burnout that I felt in the past. So I think it's important to, like, if there's a goal that you have, like you want to get to a certain point, or there's a certain number of skills that you want to learn or something like that, I think it's important that you don't wait for you to hit your goal to celebrate. You have to celebrate every step towards the goal. This is actually sort of something I learned from a Chris Williamson podcast. He was interviewing like an online personal trader named James Smith, who actually lives here in Australia. And that was his advice. And I think it relates very well to your professional life, but he was obviously talking about it in regards to like weight loss. So he was like, I have a lot of clients that want to lose 10 kilos, right? And the ones that fail are the ones that don't celebrate it when they lose 1 kilo. You know what I mean? You should have 10 celebrations on your way to losing 10 kilos, as opposed to like waiting for that goal that might be 5-6 months down the line. You know what I mean? And I think that the same thing goes with work. If you set a goal where you want to get to in say 3 years from now, and you define all the little steps that get you there, celebrate each time you hit one of those steps. Don't wait 3 years down the road to get that promotion or transition careers or anything like that. Example for me, right? I decided I want to be a cloud engineer. In my head, I had it like I needed to get my cloud practitioner cert and then my solutions architect cert and then work on some projects. And then I started applying for jobs. But yeah, I got that cloud practitioner cert. It took me maybe a couple of weeks and celebrated that, started working on some projects and posting. And I got lucky that the process only ended up taking 3 months and not a couple of years like I thought it was going to. But yeah, celebrating those small little steps is just super important, I think, because if you look too far down the line, it almost seems like it's never going to happen.
Yeah,
Oh.
that perfectly aligns with. So I think it's the same therapist that Stephanie showed me. She has a channel. Actually, I'm going to give her a shout out because she's great. It's called Therapy in a Nutshell for people who are interested. I actually don't know her name. I call her Nutshell because that's the name of the channel. So I'm always like, Nutshell has that great tidbit, but that exact thing you're talking about. So, and I might be butchering this, so try to find the episode for people who are listening. But she was saying something about, I think, like the motivation loop. And so it's basically like trying something, doing something, and then celebrating the win that you just had. And a lot of people have this like, I don't think it's ego, but it's like embarrassment of celebrating themselves or like letting themselves have that feeling of a win. So they deny that. They're like, oh, I worked hard. I'm like, whatever. Like everybody can do that thing, right? And they brush it off. And then they do something else. And then, oh, well, that's easy. Or they dismiss it. And if you block that last bit of like celebrating and feeling good, you lose the motivation loop. And it actually stops you from continuing to do things and making compounding progress towards goals. So like you actually do, and that's like another thing that leads to depression, right? So like it's super important to actually let yourself complete that loop so you can stay motivated. And then just one more aside here is I've been trying to rock climb recently. I just got a membership at a rock climbing gym and I'm a beginner, but I'm learning. I've been watching YouTube videos and I stumbled across this guy. I would shout out his channel too, but I don't remember what it's called. But he's like basically like, so people like there's grading systems for people who aren't familiar with rock climbing. It's like start with the beginner and then it's 1, 2, 3, etc. And you get like stuck on certain grades. So like I'm like climbing some V4s now and like I'm getting stuck at different places. And he's like, well, okay, on the video, don't think about the number grade as like, okay, you're only making progress when you go to V5, right? It's like, do a climb. Did you hit your hand higher than you hit it last time? Or like, did you do your footwork cleaner than you did the last time? And like focusing on those things will actually make you better. And they're actually the correct way to like measure progress. But sometimes we look at these big audacious goals and we only give ourselves any credit when we've accomplished this like giant thing versus having all these little wins along the way. So I think you can reframe that stuff to help with that motivation feedback loop.
As far as like work-life balance goes, though, I want to bring up a topic that's pretty big nowadays, and that's remote work. And we had a very interesting conversation before this that we'll probably leave there for now. But I'd be keen to, obviously, Jim, you have your own business and you work from home all day, every day. So I have a question for both of you, but they're different. So for Brian, how much does remote work make your life easier as far as work-life balance goes?
So yeah, I've been full remote for a little bit before COVID. So I've been 4 years, and it's almost hard for me to remember what it's like going to the office. But it is, so there is downsides in terms of a certain amount of time. I feel like you need to make sure you either go out and get into the gym more or you socialize a little bit more. I socialize a lot with my workmates, don't get me wrong, on Zooms and Google Meets and all those things, but making sure you're physically socializing is still important, I feel like. So that's, I guess, one negative is that you don't get as socialized. But there is way more positives in terms of, especially if you're able to like sign out for an hour or all those type of things, because you are able to I have my dog in the background. You can take the dog for a walk. You can't do that whenever you're in the building, which can make your mindset, like if you're getting frustrated on something and you need 20 minutes to go clear your head, instead of going to get a coffee and, I don't know, not getting out of the building, you can take your dog for a walk and see how happy he is on the walk and change your mindset and get back into work, and it can turn your day around. So that's just like a small little example, but it obviously helps a lot in terms of getting the kids on the bus and not having to stress about getting home to make sure you're not stuck in traffic and missing them off the school bus. Or there's so many countless ways that remote work to me makes my overall life stress lower, which helps my work output to me. So remote work is huge. I don't know how else to describe it, but yeah.
Just relating to you on that, like having gone remote basically fully for a while now, it allowed me to change my routine. So I get up super early every morning, go to the gym, and then when I get home, I shower, and me and my wife immediately go for an hour-long walk every morning. We come home and I make breakfast and we sit down and we watch the news for a little bit. So that takes me to about 8:15 in the morning. And if I had to go into the office, there's no way I would be able to stick with that morning routine, even if I woke up earlier. My gym simply doesn't open any earlier, so I can't go. So, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, I agree 100% as far as remote work being important for that work-life balance, because it like that start to my day is more important than anything else that happens to me during the day. And without that routine, I feel so thrown off most of the time that, like, even for example, right now, so currently job searching because my contract role ended. If I still don't get up at four o'clock in the morning to be at the gym for 4:30 and then go on our walk afterwards, I'm way less motivated to do any of the things that I'm supposed to be doing, like job hunting or studying or working on this podcast. So yeah, I think a lot of people need to take into consideration what remote work actually means to people, because if I'm allowed to do that morning routine every day, my work is just going to be better. The question I wanted to pose to Jim was, you own your own business and you work remotely 100% of the time, as does your employee. Have you ever thought of moving towards, I don't want to say getting an office, but like maybe having a place where you guys meet a few times a week? And do you think that would be beneficial?
So some background for people just tuning in. I've been running my business for 8 years, which has been fully remote. And I had a job before that was as remote as I wanted it to be. So that was 3 years of that. So I've been like pretty much fully remote, although I used to go in like a few days a week, but I've been like pretty remote for over a decade, right? So it's been a long time. I'm full circle with it, right? I've been doing it so long that I miss the interactions of in person. I think there's definitely pros and cons to each, but to answer your question, Jay, that was the ultimate dream. I was planning on, the guy I work with used to be based in Southern New Hampshire. I'm based in like Eastern Massachusetts. So we're going to have an office somewhere around that area. And we were at a point last year where we were thinking about growing the team again. And so my ultimate dream was to have some central office, but it would never have been a thing that was more than like a couple days a week in office. Cause I don't like the idea of making everybody full-time 9 to 5 every day of the week in the office. I think I would dread that personally. And I don't want to do anything at my company that I personally dread. But I like the idea of meeting a couple times. We were doing this thing. The guy I work with and I were meeting up at a library. So libraries have office space, a lot of them, and it's free, which is like a great hack for companies who basically we're so small that like office space would just be prohibitively expensive for us for the most part. So like those little hacks to get free office space is great, but that was really nice. We'd go once a week, we'd go meet up on like a Thursday and work together. So that was really great and didn't cost us anything. I don't know. I don't know how much more productive it made us, but it made us feel like more a part of a team, which I enjoyed. So I guess like my pros list for working remote is there's no commute. You save a bunch of time that way. I think you have happier employees who actually want to be there because they feel like they have control over their life. They can walk the dog, whatever, in between. Way less cost, less overhead. But I think some of the cons are that it is harder to focus, I think, remote, because I think we've all been there. It's like, oh, you're doing laundry, then you're cooking, then you're doing, and like next thing you know, it's like, did I work today? That like, let's be honest, that certainly happens to everybody. Like, it happens. I have my own company where like I only make money if I'm doing work, and I'll find myself like, did I do much today? So like, yeah, I think it's way harder to focus. I think your team dynamics are weaker. I think having more like rigid structure, things that you don't want to do, actually can make you happier in the long run. Like, if you have complete autonomy over your life and you can just do whatever you want at any moment, like it's this thing, like how many rich people have you seen that are just completely miserable? Like having some BS that you have to, and I would say also that like Zoom calls for me, they don't really energize me the same way that like being in person does. Like I don't feel like I'm getting the in-person interaction by being on calls all day. They actually just like drain me, versus if I'm in the office talking with people, I feel more energized. But that might just be a personal thing.
Just to highlight what you said with an example from my life. So I have a friend over here in Australia. And when the COVID lockdowns happened, they were pretty strict over here. So I had a friend who lived alone in an apartment, and that initial lockdown, I think, was like 4 months long. So he literally spent like 4 months at home alone, just like being in his apartment and not being able to leave. And it got so bad that when everything started to open up and you were allowed to go back into the office, he could work remotely as much as he wanted. But like being in that apartment, like he just couldn't take it. He couldn't take it anymore. He had to be out and he had to be around people. So I'm not like that. I don't need to be around people on a daily basis. I'm happy to do Zoom calls whenever. I have an interview this coming Tuesday. Again, it's just a Teams call. Like I'm not going into their office or anything like that. So it absolutely works for me, but it can have the opposite effect on other people. So yeah, I think it's really a case by case basis. I guess the real solution is basically allow your people to do what they think they need to do. Like don't force anybody to do anything.
Forcing
I realize
people to
it's
go
way
in.
easier.
Forcing people to go in is just you, especially after the past 4 years or 3.5 years, whatever. People get used to a certain lifestyle, and forcing people to go in to collaborate is not it feels very toxic to me. You're not going to make anybody happy going in.
Well,
If people want to go in,
especially-
then go in. Absolutely. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Especially if like you don't have some sort of set schedule, which again, hard to do because like everybody's day is different and everybody might want to work from home on a different day. But like literally what's the point of having everybody go into the office like a certain amount of days a week or a certain amount of days a month when you might be the only one in the office for those days and like everybody else comes in on a different day, you know? So you might still be doing Zoom calls instead of doing it in-person meetings and seeing people. So yeah, that really doesn't make too much sense to me either.
The company I worked at before, my company, like it wasn't set schedule. So like sometimes you would go in the office and you're the only one there and you're like, why did I come in today? So I totally get that.
I had that one of my more recent jobs. It was basically, you have to come in once a week, and it was like, okay, but there was no set schedule for everyone to be in on a certain day. And for some reason, everybody loved coming in on Thursdays. And I'm like, I'm getting it out of the way on a Monday. So I'd literally walk in, there'd be an entire floor of a skyscraper in Sydney. And I'd be maybe one of 5 people and the other 4 weren't on my team. And I had no idea who they were. So yeah, that's happened to me as well.
Yeah. I feel like a good team, a well-functioning team, you can tell who's pulling weight and who's not. And like at the end of the day, like being able to measure and like capitalize on that is what really matters. So like pissing off your best employees to make them go in, I don't think it's a winning strategy for sure. If for non-productive people, okay, well, they're not working anyways, but like you should be able to tell one way or another. Like sitting them at a desk isn't a great way. It's like a proxy. I think what companies try to do is they proxy that for trying to figure out how productive people are, right? It's like, well, they were here 9 to 5, so they weren't out riding their mountain bike. It's like, okay, yeah, okay. But maybe your employee that rides his mountain bike for 3 hours a day or whatever gets more done than the idiot who goes in the office. like what are you measuring? So I feel like it's stupid anyways, but actually that's a segue. I wanted to talk about just this like small thing here. So like for me, again, this kind of is my experience working at home, and it's something I constantly am trying to get better at, but like having structure like really helps me focus. So like focus is the number one thing, right? So at home, it's super easy for me to get unfocused and do other things. And sometimes I will get pulled that way. And at the end of the day, I'll go to bed because I'll be like, oh, there's so much I need to do. And like, I wasn't focused today and I feel bad. But like figuring out how to structure your life to get yourself focused, that might be like getting up at the same time. Maybe you do a coffee routine or you walk the dog or whatever it is to like segue you into the work, and then like actually being distraction free at your job and focus for a period of time is so key, because honestly, the hours don't equal the output. So this is work-life balance, right? Like you can work 60 hours, you can work 30 hours. It like doesn't really correspond to the output. It's really like how focused you are and how motivated you are to do the thing. And so like, I don't know, this like going to work-life balance is like, okay, at some point there's diminishing returns anyways, right? So like, are you getting more done in 70 hours than 60 hours? I personally don't. I know I fall off a cliff at a certain point where like my brain, like I think my body and my brain like puts up like a little like resistance to it's just like, it's like a protest. It's like, hey, you're pushing me too hard. And so I stopped being able to like think at a certain point. So like
Right.
you want to make sure that you're not working so many hours that you're getting those diminishing returns. You also want to make sure that you're highly focused so you're getting high output. And like some people
Yeah.
can do it in a short amount of hours. I don't know. For me, being in a small company, I'd rather the people working with me are productive than working a lot of hours. That's my personal take.
So I want to change topics here a little bit. You get burnt out, the two of you. What are some of your strategies for combating that? Because I know I've had to learn some over the years.
Like a long-term fix or I need to get stuff done and I'm feeling like I can't.
Like you're completely burnt out. You don't feel like you can wake up tomorrow and force yourself to go do work. I'm happy to start if you guys want me to.
Yeah, go for it, Jay.
Yeah, start. That'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, getting outside and doing some sort of physical activity, I think is the best thing that I found. Now, I realize that won't work for some people because some people don't like doing physical activity, especially in the IT industry. Not to
Okay, I got a hot
make
take
fun
on
of.
that one.
Hey,
I
yes.
got a hot take on that one. If that resonates with you, you need to change your mindset because like literally the body is designed to have some physical activity. And I'm sorry, like you need to somehow figure out how to find some enjoyment in that, or you're gonna have a short lifespan, or like it's gonna be bad for you long term to do that. So like, I'm sorry, like I'm gonna put a hard line in the sand for me. You guys can disagree, but like you need to somehow figure out how to move your body in a way that you enjoy, or it's gonna be bad for you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that can be just as easy. Like I said, I go for a walk for an hour every morning,
Sure,
like
do
that
something.
alone by itself. But I think there's something about being outside that is super beneficial as opposed to saying like going to the gym. But
Mhm.
yeah, just being out and seeing green, or in Boston, gray and white in the winter. But yeah, no, I think that's the most beneficial thing for me.
A quick clarification. I'm not trying to shame people who are out of shape or who are starting. Like we're all starting from different places, but like no matter where you're starting, like I think moving your body is good for you, and making the argument that you don't need it, I think is crazy. But like
Mhm.
I totally recognize that sometimes we get into places that we don't want to be in life, and you got to start somewhere, and don't compare yourself
Yeah.
to somebody else. Just find something that you can do. But Jay, I agree with those things entirely. Those strategies will really help me out of a bad mood, or like I'm stuck, or like I feel like my brain's clenched at doing stuff I don't want to do. Exercising like 100% helps me a lot, and then meeting with people too. I think I've recognized what happens here. I think when you meet with other people, you have to like you can be at home just being like a little baby, like grouchy and whatever, and like you can do that. You can live in your own little bubble and be like a dick. But when you go outside in the world, you have to pretend not to be an asshole for like a minute, and like the act of pretending will sometimes, like maybe this is just me, but like the act of pretending that I'm not the piece of shit I am at home actually makes me be less of a piece of shit.
Yeah.
So like that helps for me. The long term burnout though, like that doesn't like. I've been in these situations where like just work is just hammering me for sometimes like 6 months or more at a time. And I just feel like I'll go on, like, I'll even get away, like a project will end or I'll go away on a vacation or something. I'll come back 2 weeks later. I'll be like exactly in the same, like 2 weeks away in the Bahamas. I've never been there, but like that won't even get me out of it. So I struggle to like know what the long-term strategy is. I literally can get in these funks where like 2 minutes back into my job on a Monday after being away for two weeks, I'll be like, oh, I hate this shit and I'm ready to quit.
You say you're away for 2 weeks. We all know that you're working while you're on those vacations.
Maybe I'm not really getting away, but I just feel like sometimes like the break doesn't even like, I don't know. I have a hard time like getting out of the macro cycle.
Yeah.
I can get out of the micro
Right.
cycle, but the macro,
Well,
like that's freaking hard. I don't know.
I've got solutions for that as well that I've been employing for the last 5 or 6 years now. Sometimes you just need a scenery change and you need to leave the place of employment that you're in, especially if you don't see any progress towards what it is that you want to be doing, right? So that job that I had that I left before, or like when COVID hit, the straw that broke the camel's back. So I actually got another job, basically in the same role, just with a different company. And they brought me into a room after I handed in my resignation, and they're like, what can we do to keep you? And I only left for a small salary increase. So like that wasn't my motivation there. And they had a cloud team. And I was basically like, oh, well, I'd like to change direction and work on the cloud team. And they're like, the manager who was talking to me was basically like, okay, well, we're going to need you to get these certs first. And then we're going to need to give you a promotion and bump you up to level 3. And then you'll probably need a year there working on project work.
It's like,
And then we
I have a
can,
job in my hand.
and then we can get you to take the cloud training courses that we want you to take. And then you'd be able to move into cloud. So basically they were saying like, this is going to be a 2 or 3 year process. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can do that. I'm pretty sure I can do this faster than what you guys are telling me just by myself. So
A cloud job in your, like the new job, was it a cloud job?
it was private cloud though, as opposed to public
Ah.
cloud. So a lot of it would have been like VMware courses and stuff like that, learning they had a product called Rubrik for cloud backup. So I would have probably needed to get certified in that. But yeah, like honestly, if you're burnt out and you see no path forward, just starting to look for new employment opportunities can be a real
Yeah.
boost. Just even if you're not interviewing, even if you don't want to quit, just like
Yep.
go and look and see form a plan, form an escape
Yeah.
plan, right? And
Yeah.
even just having a plan in place can make where you are seem a lot more tolerable.
Dude, that's great advice. And just so for people who are in my situation, I'm okay. So my situation, and maybe there's some entrepreneurs that are that feel like this. I have these like my clients do great work. I work mostly in the nonprofit industry, and like I really respect and feel good about the work they're doing. But sometimes the whole process of doing client work burns, and I've reached this kind of end where like I feel completely burnt out at it. Like, and the only thing that kept me from quitting entirely was just I had these client obligations that I would feel terrible leaving people hanging. So like, there's nothing in me, like the money wasn't good enough to make me motivated. Like the work, like it was just like literally just not letting people down is the reason I didn't shut my business down for the most part. And so like you feel like you're stuck. Like if you care about delivering those things, you feel stuck. And so now like what I'm trying to do, I've delivered the obligations, which is nice, but I still have maintenance stuff. And like my new focus is to build some products internally that are a little bit more like they're more controlled by our creative direction. And so I'm hoping that that's like, we're not changing jobs. We still have the same company, but like we're changing the way that we're doing our working. So it's almost like a career shift within the structure that we've set up there, right? Because I can't with good conscience shut down the business, although sometimes I fantasize about it to like I could probably double my salary like that overnight. But like I feel obligated to service those clients that I've made promises to. But also this is my way of being like, okay, but I'm also doing a kind of a different job here. And like, we're going to see where this goes. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll have to see how it pans out. I think building products is really hard, and I'm not sure. I'm already like, man, this is really hard, and I don't even know if it's gonna make any money. But yeah, that's like my internal way of doing that for other people. Maybe it's something to try. I don't know, or maybe not. I'll let you know in 6 months. But yeah,
What about you are?
So yeah, short term, I 100% agree with the outside. I have to get reminded from my wife sometimes to get out of the house and stop sitting in your chair for so long. So absolutely getting up and
Yeah.
moving, getting outside, walking the dog, like I said. Or even it's just like if you own a home, so do something that owning a home can be overwhelming at times and you got lots of stuff that you got to do and blah, blah, blah. And just taking a minute out of your work to do something else that's productive. So then your brain feels productive. So then you want to be productive at work and all those type of positive energy type things. I feel like those really help. Or if you need something else to mentally stimulate you, like finding a book and something else to stimulate you in that way. Or if you're into video games or any of those things. I know we all stare at screens, so video game isn't as, it's not taking the break of staring at a screen, but it's still mentally stimulating you in a different way, which can then help you get out of that funk at work. So those are our short term. I'd mentioned earlier, one of my tools would be to go to management and ask for something different. If you need to change what you're doing or the team that you're working in, or like you said, Jason, sometimes it doesn't work out whenever you do ask for those things. But if you don't necessarily want to leave, but they give you a plan, sure, 3 years is a long plan, but at least you could feel like you have some direction on where you want your career to go, and that can give you a positive boost to get to where you want to go. Hopefully it's not a 3-year plan, but if they give you something, at least it can hopefully motivate you in some ways. So I guess my long term, outside of what you guys have already said, because you guys, what you have said is good. I guess is talking to management, and usually they'll work with you as long as you're a good employee. They'll work with you because they want you to be productive and they want you to be happy. And yeah, that's my, I guess that's my long term get out of the funk.
So this basically can be summed up as like, if you have small things, you can do micro things to change your state. And then if you have larger cyclical problems, then you need more like larger changes, whether that's changing jobs, changing like company direction, changing like positions or something with it by talking to your manager. Like those are bigger, like long-term burnout cyclical things, it sounds like.
Jim, what was your long term cyclical thing?
So like changing we're changing we're at this point in our company where we're trying to build some internal tools that we're going to sell direct to consumer.
Oh, that's right.
Which may or may not work out, but it's very different than what we've been doing. The biggest change is that we have creative control, right? Like we are a service business primarily. That's how we've made almost all of our money. And so like we basically, we do what we're told for the most part. And sometimes our expertise is listened to, sometimes it's not. And it's like, but you, at the end of the day, you're doing work that people are telling you to do versus like setting your own creative direction, trying to find product market fit and like bringing things to market is a whole different ball game. I think it has a much less likely probability of success. So it's like, even like success is like not usually super high recurring revenue. So like, I don't know how they'll pan out, but like for now, it's at least like, okay, I feel somewhat motivated again to be like, we're trying some different ideas. We're getting some more irons in the fire. I don't know. Maybe that's just like I can't tell if that's just a hallmark of every company that hasn't really figured their stuff out and they just like try to switch a bunch of times. I don't know. I'm not sure. This is probably horrible advice. Don't listen to me.
Well, it's not like it's a podcast or anything trying to give people advice.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know, man. I don't really I feel like I have no solid advice. I like, my career has just been like trying to figure out what works constantly. Like, oh, I think this works now. And I don't know.
So I want to say, Brian, I thought it was really interesting how you said like, get outside and take the dog for a walk as opposed to like maybe go outside and play with your kids. Just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
An interesting choice. But
The dog listens better than the kids do. So.
I'm sure that's true. Yeah.
That's probably true.
So I actually think that's probably a pretty decent place to wrap up. But I did want to end by highlighting the importance on work-life balance / avoiding burnout. So this was taken from an article from the NIH, and this little bit of the article says, employees working in IT industry are prone to develop a lot of health problems due to continuous physical and mental stress of their work. Diseases are either induced, sustained, or exacerbated by stress. The common health problems due to stress are acid peptic disease, alcoholism, asthma, diabetes, fatigue, tension headaches, hypertension, insomnia, irritable bowel syndrome, sexual dysfunction, and skin diseases such as psoriasis. So I think it's really interesting that the NIH decided to focus on the stress of the IT industry and highlight all of these things that can happen to people based off of the stress that we experience day to day. So
yeah,
to anybody listening, feel free to comment on this to let us know what your experiences have been. And also if you're looking for any additional advice that we haven't covered on this podcast. And I'm sure one of us would be happy to respond and let you know some resources that you can use to try to get out of the place where you are. So again, thanks for listening to Human in the Hard Drive, and we'll see you next time.